Now, let's go to part 2 of our supplementary lesson. What I'm giving you since last Saturday is a supplementary lesson on our course on the beginnings, especially on the account of creation. And so last Saturday, I presented to you a material that I designed that you can use, especially those of you are teachers, those of you have access to students and young people. I designed this material, collected the data in this material, which I use to present creation, okay, versus evolution, because I was saying that, students in our secular schools must have the chance, to be presented with the two views. The view of evolution, which is sadly presented in class in our schools as if it is true. So, to be more scientific in mind, they must be given the chance also to examine the other views. And so that's what I had been doing, and I had been using this material, and thank God I had a chance to do this in several schools here in Rojas City. So I'm putting this material in your hands, as I've said, that if you have a chance, that you can present creationism versus evolution, to students if you have access to them. So last Saturday, I started it with you and presented to you some definitions and some foundational statements, and also had a view of, a preview of these two views of origin. And so let us start with that, a little review, and then we will move on to the second part of this material. So we had the definition of the two views of origins, okay? And so we had evolution, where it is an imagined process by which living things formed by themselves without a creator, and then somehow improved by themselves. Okay, that is a very simple definition of evolution that I believe elementary and high school students will even understand. Okay, so according to this belief, bacteria, plants, animals, and humans have arisen by mere chance from a single remote ancestor that somehow came into existence. I have this, I pulled this up, I pulled this down from the internet, and you can have actually a lot of options. It's like from a single-celled organism, which is amoeba, and somehow by chance, this little simple organism actually just somehow by chance evolved into more complex organism, and so this very long process, so that eventually more complex organisms are formed, and eventually man is up there. So all of these are supposed to have occurred accidentally, without the benefit of any intelligence or planning. Actually, if you begin, to study even each of these individual organisms, even amoeba itself is already a complex organism. It may be a one-celled, organism, and once you have it in your stomach, you get some stomach ache. But I believe you have studied this in biology. Even the amoeba itself is complex in itself. It's not actually simple. So that's what evolution says. And the summary points of evolution, it's like this. It's like from inorganic to organic. Now, in chemistry, when we say inorganic, meaning this is the composition of non-living matter. And when we say inorganic versus organic, organic is the, the composition of what comprises the living matter or living organisms. And basically, if you break them down, it will be carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And, by the molecular arrangement of these atoms and molecules, something organic or living. Even your biology says organic, It's the living things. Somehow, organic or living things came out of inorganic substances like hydrogen and oxygen and nitrogen. Or simply, they would say from non-living, and by chance, somehow some non-living substances, by chance, brought about something that is alive. I don't know if you can accept it. Or even to make it more simple, that somehow a hydrogen molecule, H2 in its chemical formula, a hydrogen molecule, eventually somehow by combination with others and by chance somehow it became a man. Okay, those are the very simple ways, of saying what evolution is trying to assume. And the mechanisms for evolution are, look at these words: chance, spontaneous generation, adaptation, natural selection, and transmutation or mutation. Now, you hear a lot of these words actually today, especially with COVID-19 pandemic, no? And these evolution mechanisms necessitates a very long period of time, and evolutionists propose the Earth's age to be 5 billion years. That alone can science can also refute. So that's evolution. And so look at this. This is the succession of evolution in a summary form, starting from a protozoan like your amoeba and your paramecium. They become a metazoan invertebrates. They became the vertebrate fishes. These ones have no vertebrae, and then we have the vertebrate fishes. And then the fishes become amphibians like frogs, and the amphibians become reptiles like your crocodile or your dinosaurs. And then they began to become birds, and they had the wings. And the birds, finally they develop into fur-bearing quadrupeds, like your four-legged animals and mammals. And eventually apes evolved, and of course, eventually men. Okay, so that is the succession of evolution. And I think even just by common sense, we cannot believe that. However, biblical creation is saying that it presents an initial creation by God through which all the laws, the processes, and entities of nature were brought into existence as described in the book of Genesis. And so the summary points is that we believe that there is a creator God, and it is him who brought everything into being and then also established natural laws to maintain and sustain what he created. Okay? That's his established laws. And a subsequent event to the creation account is what we call the Genesis flood, which we have just learned last night. Okay? Creationists attribute to the modern-day topography of a sudden hydraulic episode that produced a sedimentation and fossilization in a scale that never happened since. One of the major sources of what science present as their support to the theory of evolution are the fossils that they excavated, from, sedimentation, these rock formations. And it is these that they present as proof. But, however, creationists would say that what scientists now present, from this, the topography or the physical appearances of all this sedimentation where fossils were removed, is not actually a product of evolution, but actually a product of a sudden, catastrophic hydraulic event. And that is what is being spoken in the book of Genesis. So instead of being a record of gradual transformation, the geologic record, the records of geology, in the different strata of sedimentation on the rock formation, the geologic record is perceived actually is a record of a sudden cataclysmic mass death and destruction, which is a testimony to the awesome power and judgment of God when not so long ago, the world which then was perished beneath a worldwide flood waters. in this view, then, the past is the key to the present. Meaning, whatever happened in the past explains what scientists now see in the present. But what scientists are doing, class, is they try to study the present. They study the rock formations, the sedimentations, and discover the fossils. And they try to explain the past from what they see or excavate now. But what should be is, the past should be explaining what scientists now see in our time, or will still be discovering in the future time. Why do we have all these rock formations? What are the fossils? Why do we have these fossils? What are they telling us? Are they to explain evolution, or rather are they going to point to something that happened in the past? So the point here is this. If geologic findings, if the findings of science will point to the fact of a worldwide cataclysmic mass death and destruction through a flood, then we can say that that account in Genesis chapter 6 to 8 that we learned last night is a true event, and that would also mean that the other earlier recorded events in your book of Genesis are true, and it would eventually lead us back to Genesis 1, that the creation account, that there was a God, all-wise creator God, who brought everything into being to be true. So if the flood is true, then that is an event recording in the Bible. And so creation then also must be a fact recorded also in the Bible. So it is not the Bible that will prove itself to be true, because as we have learned, the Bible doesn't prove God to be existence. It simply declares. But rather, science itself, the findings of science, the facts of science, these are the ones that are going to prove that the biblical account is true. The flood event is true. The creation account is true. I want you to get that point. So let's go to this. So the proper role of science in this material that I prepared is that scientific facts must be used to ascertain which model of origins is more probable, so that the invested faith is intelligent and not blind. We said that faith is the evidence of things hoped for and the substance of things not seen. And I have said, that even those who believe or who try to embrace the theory of evolution, they actually needed a lot of faith as well, because they're putting, their trust in something, that so many things are missing. So many gaps are still there. So many things are still unexplained. And for them to embrace that, that requires faith. In the same manner as we, believers of God, we believe that, by the word of God, creation, came into being. We didn't see that. We were not there, but we believe it. And once we believe, then Hebrews says, when by faith we understand. So, evolutionist needs faith, creationist needs faith. So the question now is, which model of origin is more probable? So that your faith, if it is on evolution, will not be a blind faith, or your faith as a believer of the Creator God is not a blind faith, but it is an intelligent faith. So which of these two theories of origins are more probable? What is going to help us in the decision? Well, we will not use the Bible, because then those who do not believe in the Bible will say we are just being biased. So what we will do is to use science itself. We will let science to help us decide which theory of origin is more probable, so that our faith will be intelligent and not blind. Are you getting me, student? You please focus now on my presentation. Are you getting me? Am I coming through? Yes. Is this helping you? Okay. Yes, I just want you to know that. I believe there are many teachers in the class and you can use this. Use this if you have a chance. This is very important. If you have young people in your house or students in your house, in your household, during this time of quarantine and stay at home, try to gather them around, and teach them this material. Because our young people now are bombarded with the lies of the secular world. All right. So that is the intention. So this presentation is not to use the Bible to prove creation by a creator God, but this is to present scientific findings to show which of the two models correlate much better with pure science. Which is more, as I would say, scientific? The creationist point of view or the evolutionist point of view? What I am going to present to you now are what I pulled down from the notes that I have given you. I had actually a very long list that I've given you, but what I did is just pulled out some major ones, and that is what I'm going to present to you today in the next 30 minutes, just to inspire you that actually, wow, there's so much in science that points to, creation. But there are more in your notes, and actually there are more that you can research, because more and more scientific discoveries or archaeological findings are coming out that would even further point to the fact, that there is a wise creator who brought everything into being. So I just selected a few, and let's go through this, just to inspire you. First one are the geologic facts that point to the flood. I want to start with this because of our lesson last night. We read last night how God flooded the earth, so that once beautiful earth with a tropical climate, God brought about rain for the first time and opened, the springs on the ground, and even brought down water from the skies, the atmospheric design that God has made in the beginning, where there was waters between the waters. All of that were disturbed, that brought down so much water on the surface of the earth and caused that flooding. And all of that happened suddenly, class, in a worldwide magnitude and in a catastrophic way that surely have brought about so much destruction on the face of the earth, on animals and on plantation and even on the topography of the earth. So much. And so whatever now is being unearthed by geology today should be studied, whether they are proving evolution or they are, in coherence with what science itself have already established about the processes, in the formation of rocks. We don't have time to go into all the details, but you can research on things like sedimentation, fossilization, lithification. These are all processes that are now established as processes by science and relevant to geologic findings and rock formation. So what is important here is what geology have discovered. There are geologic findings which point to a massive geologic event, which is a sudden cataclysmic death and destruction as that recorded in the Genesis flood. The fossil record, you understand what fossils are, okay? The fossil record of the geologic column does not show a history of evolving life forms, but it showed a sudden mass extermination of life from another age. And only the annihilation of the antediluvian world, that's the world before the flood, okay, the pre-flood world that we studied last night, around by the Genesis flood, as the scriptures record, could explain this. That sometime in the past, as Genesis 7:23 says, that God said that every living thing on the face of the earth was wiped out men and animals and the creatures that move along the ground and the birds of the air were wiped from the earth. Only Noah was left and those with him in the ark. And so fossils excavated by geology class, what do they show? What have they observed in what they have excavated in geology? Are the fossilization and all the remains that they have discovered pointing to, that things evolve, in a very gradual way? Or are they pointing to that something really cataclysmic happened sometime in the past? So let's look into this. These are the geologic facts that point to the flood. One is the global and massive fossilization, which is a proof of rapid burial and formation. Otherwise, dead matter decay or eaten by scavengers. For example, you have a cat. Your cat died. In our time now, that cat will not turn into a fossil because there are processes like sedimentation and lithification that are needed so that a fossil will be formed. The normal thing is when an organic thing dies, like a bird or a cat or a dog or a fish dies, what will happen is, that will rot. Dead matter will decay or even eaten by scavengers. But what geology have found out is there are large-scale fossilization, and these are proof that there was one time a rapid burial and formation. There was a sudden burial of so many species, and that burial was accompanied by, very low temperature, freezing temperature, and sudden pressure on top of whatever have died and have settled down in the bottom, of the sediments. This process of lithification and sedimentation, and later on these were unearthed by geology, and they were just so massive fossils. Large-scale fossilization does not occur anymore today, because today when something dies, it does not sink to the bottom anymore and become a fossil, but it will decompose. But it is not anymore carried down by a rapid burial and lithification, which are the essential processes for the formation and the preservation of fossils. Lithification is that process in which the pressure and low temperature makes sediments or whatever have settled down below in the earth's strata, they become rock solid. And there is also the coming in of silica and other substances that took the place of whatever is the organic matter that has decomposed, and they have taken place, the structure of an animal, and so they were preserved. But those processes do not happen now. But geology have discovered massive fossils of different species of animals, together, and many parts of the world. And what could have brought all those species of living organisms and animals together, in different, in places like that they have unearthed? There must be something that happened sometime in the past. And what could that be? There's only one event that tells us that could have brought it about. That is the flood. Number 3, the fossil graveyards. Geology have found that there are caves, fissures, and mass burial sites throughout the world that are packed with masses of fossils of various animals from widely separated and differing climatic zones. As if thrown together in disorderly masses, and animals are commonly found buried in an attitude of terror with heads arched back and mouths open. Now you imagine what happened. What if there will be great flooding that will come to your area now? You remember what happened in Iloilo when Typhoon Frank came? Everybody run to higher places. Everybody run. Both animals and people have to find a place to hide or have to find a higher ground. And everybody were running in fear. And the last, movement or, action that they have is to lift their heads and open their mouths as the water, gets higher and higher. And they're being, all flooded by water. And they're trying to catch their last breath before they are totally drowned in massive, turbulent waters. Now, these are the fossil graveyards, and you can imagine these animals, they had to run for their lives. Different animals in massive graveyards. What could have caused it? Is it evolution? This itself, class, is a vivid geologic finding that points to something cataclysmic that happened sometime in the past. So that is geology. Another one is the mammoths, these wild, great mammals. There are millions of mammoths. Take note, it's not just one. Millions of mammoths and other large animals were killed instantly in the North Polar regions. And many were preserved whole and undamaged, with flesh and hair intact. Others even kneeling or standing with food on their mouths. And the eyes are still red blood cells were preserved. You know what happens? Like, in the milkfish fish pond, after catching the milkfish, they immediately put them, in ice and freeze them. And there was sudden freezing, and the entire fishes are preserved with the eyes and all parts. And later when you thaw them, you can cook them again. And this is what they've seen. Now you can research this. This is a fact of science. There in the North Pole, where it was already very cold, and then when the sudden destruction of the earth came, so even these mammoths who can withstand very low temperatures were even caught off guard, and they died. And it says there are millions of them, and the sudden cataclysmic event, froze them to death. And now geology have found them. Something happened in the past that have caused this. And that points to the flood recorded in the book of Genesis. Let's move on because I'm running out of time. Now again, we will have, so those are the specific geologic findings that point to the possibility, or I would say now, point to that account of Genesis 6 to be something that truly happened. Now, moreover, let's go to the other fields of science. Now, we said, biblical creation as science. How do we relate the two? I told you when I make this presentation, I would ask the students at the beginning, true or false? Science and Bible contradict with each other. What is the normal answer? What is the default answer is what? Can you type in what your answer is? Science and the Bible contradict with each other. What's the default answer? Yes. Yeah, that's the default answer. But if you are more scientific, you have to begin to think. So that's what the purpose of this presentation, that at the end they will see that science and the Bible creation account and the Bible are not in contradiction. Rather, you look at here, God created the physical world and set laws to govern it. Therefore, whatever God says in His Word about His creation are true, correct, and accurate because He made them. Science discovers, analyzes the creation. The laws of science that man have discovered are the very laws that God has established. Therefore, even if the Bible is not a science textbook, any reference it makes to creation must be scientifically correct. The question is, are there enough scientific facts to substantiate this? Are there certain scientific facts that we can find some biblical references? And when you compare these, do they contradict or they agree with each other? So that's the next set of things that we are going to take up. Let's just go through these very quickly. Okay, the scientific facts about the atoms. We had this before. Now it is established, you learned this in chemistry, that atoms are the building blocks of the physical world. We learned that in the beginning, in Genesis 1, and 3, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. Now, science has discovered and established that atoms, which are the building blocks of all physical reality, are composed essentially of three things. What is that? Space, matter, and energy. Now, the creation account tells us that the eternal God in the beginning created the raw materials, which is the building blocks, from which he brought into being all that he created. See? So look at this. What did God create? As we have read, this is what science and the Bible, they agree in this. God created the heavens, and the heavens is space. And the Hebrew word for heavens means stretched out space. Second, God created the earth, which is matter, the substance, the soil, the ground. And the Hebrew word for earth, eretz, simply means dirt or matter. And then God said, let there be light, which is energy. Light includes the entire electromagnetic spectrum, from short waves, gamma rays, to long wave, radio waves. All energy forms are accounted for here. So you see, class, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. God created space and matter and energy. And now science says that's what practically now is composing, every physical matter on earth. There is space, there is matter with mass and weight, and there is energy. With energy actually is found in light. Light here contains all the energy spectrum can account for. Where did this all come from? Then we will see that electrons began their atomic movements, physical matter began to exist, and today chemistry has named these different atoms in the periodic table. We're happy that scientists have organized, and identified these different atoms according to their atomic weight, the number of electrons that they have and the number of protons that they have. But they simply have discovered, have identified, and have organized them in a periodic table, what somebody who designed them have done in the beginning. One fact of science that agrees with what the scripture says. Let's move on. Let's focus on the nucleus of the atom. The nucleus of all atoms is a scientific mystery. I mentioned this earlier, actually. You see, the nucleus is composed of protons and neutrons. All the positive protons stick together in the nucleus of the atom. Now, electromagnetic law says that like poles repel each other. It remains a miracle of science that the structure of every atom in the universe doesn't fly apart. What does the Bible say? Look, protons are held together strongly in the nucleus of the atom, but these protons are all positive. How come they do not repel each other? Is there an explanation for that? Well, we have Colossians 1:16 and 17. It says, for by him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible. He is before all things, and in him all things what? Hold together. Inasmuch that if man interferes with God's creation, destruction results, such as in the case of nuclear bombs using the process of nuclear fission, which is the splitting of the nuclei of atoms accompanied by conversion of part of the mass into energy. You interfere with what God holds together, it will be destructive. Now, science is still baffled by that fact about the protons being held together in an atom. But we see the Word of God says, God Almighty hold things together. Yes, it is amazing, as you say here in the chat group. Water in the interstellar space. This is another fact of science. And you know, scientists more there are more and more scientific evidences showing that there is water in the emptiness of the interstellar space. Now, even astronauts who had traveled into the space have testified to this. That is another fact of science. And this is what God have created. Actually, in Genesis 1:2, we read in there that God's Spirit moving over the waters. There in the outer space, in the universe, at the beginning of the creation account, God was moving over the waters. Then in verse 6, there was the separation of the waters by a firmament. This suggests that the waters were already created, yet there was no previous mention of creation of water. It appears, therefore, that there is something about the expanse of heavens which inherently includes water. And scientists are just discovering more and more evidences to that. Here's one, an argument from mathematics. Now, I think those of you who are mathematicians will enjoy this. Okay? Are you one? Just give me a thumbs up if you are a math wizard. Okay, nobody is putting a thumbs up. You are too humble to admit. All right. Here is something in math. We call this the principle of probability. Probability means the possibility. I'm planning a thumbs up down for myself. Okay, let's look. This probability is the possibility of an event to or thing to happen. And the more complex the expected event or product, the lesser its probability to happen. So, with this law or fact in math, look at this. For example, you know, the more complex what you expect to have or result that you want, the less probable it is. For example, even the probability of being hit by a lightning is 1 in 600,000. You know, you walk down the road, it's raining, and there is thunder and there is lightning. The probability that one person will be hit is in 1 to 600,000. Here, the probability of even spelling the word evolution by randomly selecting letters from the alphabets, from alphabets A to Z, and you randomly pick letters from that, and you will come up with the correct spelling of the word evolution. The probability of that, if you just do it by chance, is 1 per 5,429,503,680,000. Even that, a simple exercise as that. So you can spend your whole lifetime probably doing this. You spread out on the table 26 alphabets and you try, to randomly pick how many letters are there in the word evolution. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You try to pick 9 letters with closed eyes. And what is the probability that you're going to pick up the 9 correct letters in the correct order and you come up with the word evolution correctly spelled? The probability of that happening is that 5,429,503,680,000. You will grow gray hairs before probably you can do it. So it is mathematically impossible for even the most elementary form of life to have risen by chance. Even the one-celled amoeba is not simple in its structure, and much more consider DNA molecule. Life is not an accident. They study the DNA molecule of a very complex thing. And how come that they would say that we all just came about by chance? So the possibility that even the DNA molecule will, come by chance is very, very little considering its complexity. So, using probability as our mathematical basis. So, what is the probability of the highly complex systems and intricate structures of the universe we have now to be produced by mere chance or accidentally start from gases in space clustering together in correct amount at correct temperatures? What is the probability of all the heavenly bodies, the constellations, our solar system, the planets to be in the right places now, and we can trust that they will not get off their orbits so that we will wake up again tomorrow knowing that the earth is in its right position and we are safe? What is the probability of the earth to be positioned in the right place now from the sun so that life can exist on it? Could everything happen by mere chance, by accident, as they proposed? The only explanation we can have is there is a great designer who brought all these things into beings. Now, geology. This is one crazy thing that I want to discuss with you. Geology is the branch of science that deals with the physical nature, history, and development of the earth. And evolutionists, they are very proud of this thing that they call the geologic column. Well, this thing actually is just in the mind of the evolutionist. It is an imagined chronological arrangement of rock units in columnar form with the presumed oldest units at the bottom and the presumed youngest at the top. Therefore, the simplest and the earliest organisms that evolution proposed must be found, in the bottom, and the more complex organisms, if you're going to look for fossils or remains of organisms, must be found in the top layers of this geologic column. And so I have it here. I'm covering portion of it. I have this. This is the geologic column, and presumably it should be that the simple one should be in the bottom, and as you go up, at the column of the geologic column, you will have here the more complex organisms. So if you are here standing on top, on the surface of the earth, and if you try to dig down into the bottom, of the strata of the earth, going through the different strata or levels of sedimentation that archaeology is trying to unearth, if the geologic column is true, then you will find fossils of more complex organisms here. And as you go down the column, the simpler you will find the fossils or the remains of the simpler organisms. So from the top, you will have the more complex organisms. And, the fossils that you will see must be the fossils of organisms that are getting more and more simple as you go down. But the fact is, the order of arrangement was based on the index fossils contained in the earth strata, but these do not exist. Nowhere in the world class that you stand on any surface of the earth here. Or even you go to a place where they say there are a lot of fossils there. You stand there and try to dig. See if you can find this geologic column. This is non-existent as they propose. What they have is a very circular reasoning. Historical geology based on the assumption of evolutionary biology. The geologic column is a primary evidence by evolutionists to explain evolutionary process. But the column in turn was built on the assumption that organic evolution is a fact. So this is what they do. Evolutionists say, evolution happened from simpler to complex organism, and the proof is the geologic column. Whereas those who propose the geologic column say, that we have the geologic column because of evolution. So they have these two things that they propose. One explains the other, and the other uses the other one to explain. So they come in a circular method, and they never end up because two lies try to support one another. The fact is, the real rock formation, in reality, rock formations on the Earth strata have gaps or are reversals of the ideal geologic column. It exists only in the minds of geologists. Nowhere can you find it in a particular locality. In order to see all of the representative parts of the entire column, one have to travel all over the world. You cannot find the geologic column in just one place. Stop here because there's still so much that I need to discuss. We'll continue on with this next Saturday. But what I'm trying to say to you is this. If you read your notes, facts of science and whatever biblical, whatever the Bible mentions about creation account, they are synchronized with each other. Because as I have said, God created the heavens and the earth. And if there is anyone who can say what is true and right and correct about, the world and the universe, it is the one who created it. I'm not against science. My field is science. But I am for facts of science, not on theories of science. Okay. God bless you. Just have more of these next week. Take a break. Tanggal